And ever since I got these bikes, that pile that I bought for very little money of these old Hondas, this has been a puzzle to me, what to do with this one. This is a CR125 M Elsinore, Honda's two-stroke. Well, they were a racing bike, and although people get confused about this, the really high performance stuff is really not very useful except on the track. These are real peaky. You can't go trail riding with an Elsinore. They've got to be wound up. They're just not a trail bike. They're a track bike. And I don't see me ever using it the way it was designed to be used. When these came out, they kind of set a trend. Up to that point, motocross was really more of a challenge to keep your bike running. It really wasn't a matter of skill. It was if you could keep the thing together through the whole race. But when they came out with these, all of a sudden, if you had any amount of skill, you could be competitive. Your hardware wasn't holding you back. So they got to be very popular, though there isn't a lot of them around anymore. So I was surprised to run into this one. Like I say, this one has been converted for flat track. The thing around here, it was never a big deal back in like the mid-70s. The motocross really wasn't that big a deal. There was more of the flat track, and had been for a long time. The Midwest, the whole area was all flat track racing. And they'd run these, you could run them indoors, in a big arena, and on the short track. And that's evidently what these people had been doing since I could see all these bikes that whole pile had been played with in that way. And that's why this one has been converted to the 19-inch front wheel and the front brake taken off because they don't use them in flat track. And all the monkeying with the setback, the handlebars and all that. But it wouldn't be hard to convert it back to a standard Elsinore. Also got a lot of the parts. The problem, they had seized up a piston, which, not too unusual in a racing two-stroke. And those parts are available. I'd have to put in a new rod and the crank pin and bearings and bore out the cylinder, but it could be done. My problem that I run into is, okay, so if I put in the time and the money to put this back to stock Elsinore, what am I going to do with it? I have no use for a stock Elsinore. My first thought when I saw it was, okay, it's got the 19-inch front alloy rim. They came with a 21, but for flat track I'd use the 19s. So it's got 18 on the back, 19 on the front, good alloy rims. And I really want them. I've got another project I'm working on that I wanted to switch to alloy rims. Okay, in the background, I think it'll show up on the camera. For a dirt bike, I use my XT 500 Yamaha. And for my street bike, I've got my SR, which I drive every day. That's a great bike. I like that. That's the perfect bike for me. But for dirt, then, like I said, I've got that XT, though that is somewhat modified. Motor carburation is all stock. It's got the Super Trap exhaust on it. But the whole front suspension is off a YZ400. because the XT stock have pretty spindly suspension, and that's a big heavy bike for that skinny fork tubes. So I switched that to the YZ, which was Yamaha's motocrosser. Just makes it much more stable. Uh, Great bike, and like I say, I'm into 500s, and this one is like, let's say, detuned to the point where it's very nice for riding on trails. Somewhat heavy as a trail bike, but it's a brute, a very good low-end power bike. These things aren't. These are high-end power, crazy high-end. You got to be right on that pipe all the time. So, I don't know exactly what. I could turn around and sell parts off of this. I could keep the rims. I could actually keep that whole front end. But there are parts, even that shift lever alone, the stock CR shift lever, is worth more than I paid for the whole bike. And it's got good side covers and a good front fender. And the seat is basically good. It needs to be recovered. But, there's a lot of parts that I could sell off of this and get rid of them. At the same time, you get this feel like you're cutting a horn off a unicorn. These are kind of rare. You don't just go butchering them for no good reason. So I guess first thing what I'll do is I'll pull that motor out of there, split the cases, and see what I'm dealing with inside. But like I say, I know I would have to put time and money into it to get it back, and then when I got it back, what do I got? A stock CR that would be useless to me. Yeah, you could sell it, but really profit-wise, this is the most profitable it will ever be. I could part it out, come out way ahead, and have parts left over that I wanted. Like I could sell the front end, whole front suspension, but at the same time, I've got that Lifan motor that fits in a 125 frame, not this frame, but a standard 125 frame that I could easily put this front end on, which would greatly increase the suspension on the stock over the stock Honda one. And it's a good chance the swing arm might fit too. So I could make a good trail bike out of that using that Lifan motor. Or even like a stock 125. I'm sure I could bolt that front end and that rear end on that little CL 125. But it's a quandary. But a motocross bike, I really have no practical use for it. Even playing around, I was never really into playing around. I like trail riding, but not motocross. That's a whole different, it's a whole different level of performance. They spend more time in the air than they do on the ground. So I don't know. It's a puzzler, but like I say, I want those alloy rims. And I do have I've got another set of alloy rims that have the 21 front off all these other parts. And they're the good DID alloy rims. Now I want the 18 and the 19 to put on. I've got another SR that's stripped down with the high performance stuff on it. But the wheels that are on it are those cast aluminum wheels, which are like boat anchors. They're fine on a street bike. There's no maintenance to them. But for a performance bike, you really want to go with the spoke alloy rims, those DIDs. Now I can do it on that one. So the problem is there you're involved with the disc brakes. But if I buy the front wheel from an RD 400, which is where the front of the SR came from, was an RD 400. I can get the spoke hub that I could lace that rim to. And I've done this before. It's not a big thing. if you've done it before. It's a big thing if you're not familiar with how to lace up a rim. Now the rear wheel, the hub would have to come off an XS 650 Yamaha, because the whole swing arm and the rear end is off a 650. You know, when they made the SR, it's basically the XT motor with parts off the RD and the 650. But like I say, that's a fun bike, the high performance one, but it's the 4-stroke and that's cammed up and stuff. And so it's not really an everyday rider. It's like a heavy rocket. But it would be nice to lighten it up with those spoke rims. So these are the things that I puzzle over, what to do with this. There's a lot of good parts here, but at the same time, like I say, it's cutting the horn off a unicorn, because these things, the stock CR is very sought after, very collectible, because they changed the whole motocross industry. A lot of aftermarket parts builders started building parts for the CRs, because you know, when they came out, like I say, they were top of the line. It was like being able to buy a factory race bike right off the showroom floor for like $800, and you could be competitive. Well, then Honda didn't really change them for a long time. They thought, okay, we've done this. They kept them the same. And Suzuki and Yamaha and Kawasaki, everybody started really pushing, improving their bikes to be competitive, because the Elsinore had kind of taken over. So there was a lot of radical changes made. You know, that's where you got your liquid cooling on the newer ones, stuff like that. But for a long time, the Honda stayed the same, with only minor changes, and then they had to start playing catch up too, because they were losing ground, and because it's a competitive field, you know, the high-end racing bikes. But everybody was trying to get in on it at that time, because it was great. You know, if you would win races, you would sell bikes, you know. And not the bike that won the race, you would sell street bikes, because your name would be out there. But I really puzzle over what to do with this thing. But what I will do, I think, is today I'll just pull that motor out and tear it apart. But I've looked and there are parts readily available, both stock and aftermarket parts. And they're simple, you know, the engineering is very involved, but the machine themselves are basically pretty simple. It's just that there's a lot of technology involved in the porting and stuff. You know, they're really tweaked to get the most out of them. But it's not my kind of thing. I like the big single-cylinder 4-strokes. So it's a puzzler. But there are parts out this that I really want, and most of them aren't the stock CR parts. You know, like I really like these solid alloy bars. Okay, so I'm keeping them. That'll go on my other bike, or maybe even on that bike. I've got solid alloy bars on there now, but I like flat track bars are the right feel for me. The setbacks got to come off of there, because they don't serve any purpose to anybody. So I don't know. You know. But like I say, motor will come apart. Then I'll think about it more. But there's a lot of technology involved here. There's a lot of magnesium. So they put a lot of effort into it. For a company who vowed to never build a two-stroke, it was kind of developed in secret by some of the engineers, and all of a sudden just sprung on the market, a two-stroke Honda. I don't know. But I just know if I had a completely restored Elsinore, or ride it a couple times, I'd lose interest in it if I didn't hurt myself on it, because you can hurt yourself on that. But that's true of any, the real high performance stuff. It's a great skill to control something like that. But I don't have a desire to develop that skill. I like trail ride, I like poking around with my XT. That I like. But flying through the air on an Elsinore just doesn't really appeal to me. Well, I guess it's a good quandary to have, but when I look at this, I look at it and I see a lot of good parts I can make use of. But at the same time, I see a lot of good parts I could just sell off to somebody who is restoring a CR that they would be happy to have. But then there's that unicorn dilemma. Yeah, I'll mull over some more, but it's been bugging me for a while what I'm going to do with this thing. I've been kind of putting off confronting it, but I'll have to get at it someday. But I think for now I'll just pull that motor out, and then I can think about what I want to do with the rest of it. But I just know it's just not my kind of animal. It's interesting, and I remember, opening the first crate that came in with an Elsinore, and I thought, wow, that's different. I just didn't expect to run across one. Especially, dirt cheap. But it's just not really in my line. Yeah, well, we'll mull her over some more, but I'll get that motor out and see what I'm actually dealing with down there.